Rational therapy, or rational-emotive therapy, also called RT for short, is based on several fundamental propositions or hypotheses. And the first of these is that the past is not crucial in a person's life. The past affects him a good deal, but he affects himself much more than the past affects him, because no matter what he has learned during his historical development, the only reason why these things that have happened to him and that have been told to him affect him today is because he is still re-indoctrinating himself with the same philosophies of life, the same values that he usually imbibed and taught himself to early in his childhood. So we stick largely in the present in rational-emotive psychotherapy rather than in the past. And we believe that today the individual experiences negative emotions, self-defeating behavior, inefficiencies, because he now is indoctrinating himself with what we call simple exclamatory sentences, which involve ideas. Human beings can tell themselves ideas in all kinds of languages, in pictures, in sign languages, in nonverbal expression, in math, for example, but they normally speak to themselves in simple English, if English is their native tongue. And when they talk to themselves in an irrational or an illogical way, then they literally create their negative feelings or emotions and the behavior that follows therefrom. Now, just to give an example, the individual usually tells himself when he's upset, first a sane sentence and then an insane sentence. The sane sentence is something along the order of, I don't like the thing that I've done. I dislike my own behavior. And that would be fine, but unfortunately he follows it with an insane sentence which says to himself, and because I don't like my behavior, I am a louse, I am worthless, I am a no-goodnik. And this thoroughly insane sentence, which is a sentence of faith unfounded on fact, which has no empirical reference, which is a kind of superstitious or dogmatically religious system, creates what we call his anxiety, and through his anxiety, his depression, his guilt, his other forms of self-defeatism. Or again, the individual tells himself the same sentence, I don't like your behavior, when, let us say, somebody has acted badly with him, and instead of following that up with that because I don't like your behavior, I can still stand it, and I'm going to try to get you to change your behavior, he says, I can't stand your behavior. Or in an absolutistic, godlike, grandiose manner, you shouldn't be the way you are because I think that I don't like the way you are. Now, it's these second B sentences which upset the individual. Or another way of putting it, as Epictetus, a Roman philosopher, said many years ago, it's not what happens to us at point A that upsets us, it's B, our view of what happens to us. And in rational-emotive psychotherapy, we go after this individual, the patient's view, and show him that whatever he thinks has upset him, usually some external situation, what somebody else has done, it's really what he's telling himself about this thing, this event, which upsets him. And although he may never be able to do anything about the external event at A, he can change the internal event, his sentence, his belief to himself at B. Now, in rational-emotive psychotherapy, we try to show the patient three kinds of insight in contradistinction to some other therapies, which usually emphasize one major kind. The first kind we try to show him is that all his behavior, especially his negative, self-defeating behavior, which we're interested in, which is upsetting him, has clear-cut ideological antecedents. He may have learnt these, as I said before, in the past, but right now, today, he must still believe these same ideologies, else he would not get the negative behavior that flows therefrom. And insight number two, which is most important and which is unfortunately neglected in many other systems of psychotherapy, is that he, being, as Ernst Cassirer once said, a symbolizing animal, is continually re-indoctrinating himself with these ideologies. And that's the issue. That's why he's now disturbed. Now, insight number 3 is that even when he sees clearly what he's telling himself and that he's telling himself nonsense, only by work and practice, by continually reassessing and revaluing his own philosophic assumptions, will he ever get better. Now, we also stress the fact that action is necessary to change an individual. Just talking about things, thinking about things is nice, but not necessary. I should say it's not a necessary condition for psychotherapeutic change. What the individual has to do in addition usually is act, and we therefore give him concrete homework assignments and get him to act these out and check up and follow to see whether he does these homework assignments. And our final goal is to get the individual to learn, and learn for the rest of his life, to challenge and question his own basic value systems, his own thinking, so that he really thinks for himself. He must do this particularly when he feels miserable, he feels anxiety or depression or guilt or too much frustration or anything else that is negative, or when he behaves very inefficiently. And finally, he was able, through this kind of new thinking, rethinking his own assumptions, to apply what we call the scientific method to the facets of human living, and to be truly scientific in his behavior, to question and challenge his own assumptions as we do in science, and thereby to minimize, though never entirely to eliminate, the terrible anxiety and the atrocious hostility which unfortunately affects most of us in this existence. Hello, Gloria. I'm Dr. Ellis. You want
Dear Dr. Ellis.
Be seated, please?
Mm-hmm.
Well, would you like to tell me what's bothering you most?
Yeah. I think the things that I'd like to talk to you the most about are adjusting to my single life. Mostly men, I guess. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I'm doing the wrong thing, but I'm going to refer to your book anyway, because this is what I'm impressed with, the book about the Intelligent Woman's Guide to Manhunting.
Yeah.
I tried to follow it, and I believe in it. This is why it's so fun reading your book, because I'm not much of a reader, but I sort of believe the same way you do. But then I've got a problem in this area. The men that I'm attracted to, or the type of man I'd like to become closely involved with, I can't seem to meet, or I get too shy with, or something that it just doesn't click. The men I seem to be dating nowadays are the ones that I don't respect much, the ones I don't enjoy much, that seem blip and uninteresting. And I don't know if it's something about me or what, because I really do want to meet this kind of man.
Well, let's talk a little about your shyness. Let's suppose you meet somebody whom you consider eligible, that you might like. Now, let's see if we can get at the source of your shyness, just what you're telling yourself to create this. You meet this man and you feel shy, embarrassed?
Yes, but I don't usually show that. I usually act flip right back.
Yeah.
I act like the other men act to me, as a matter of fact. I act flip. I don't seem near as intelligent. I act like a typical dumb blonde. I'm just not myself with him. I'm more on at ease.
Yes, well, as you probably know from manhunting, I believe that people only get emotions such as negative emotions of shyness, embarrassment, shame, because they tell themselves something in simple exclamatory sentences. Now let's try to find out what you're telling yourself. You're meeting this individual. Now what do you think you're saying to yourself before you get flipped?
I know what it is, that I don't stand up to his expectations. I'm not quite enough for him. He's superior to me. Although I want this type of man, I'm afraid I won't have enough to attract him.
Well, that's the first part of the sentence, and that might be a true one, because maybe he could be superior to you in some ways. Maybe he wouldn't be attracted to you, but that would never upset you if you were only saying that. I think he may be superior to me. Now, you're adding a second sentence to that, which is, if this is so, that would be awful.
Well, not quite so extreme as that, because I've thought about that, too. It's usually, I've missed my chance again, because when I want to if I want to show the very best of myself, because I think I have self-confidence that I have enough to offer.
Yeah.
But when I get afraid like that, then I show all the bad qualities. I'm flip, I'm then I'm so much on the defensive that I can't show my good qualities. And it's like I missed my chance again. There was a good opportunity to be close to this man, and I loused it up again.
All right, but even let's suppose you're saying that, and I think you really are, but you must be saying something else too, because if you were just saying, hell, I missed my chance again, you'd say, all right, next time I'll take advantage of what I learned this time and do it a little better. Now, you still must be saying, if you feel shame, embarrassment, shyness, that there's something pretty bad about your error in missing your chance again.
I don't know if this follows in context to what you're saying, but the thing I do feel is that I get suspicious then. Am I the type of woman that will only appeal to the ones that are to not my type of guy anyway? Is there something wrong with me? Am I never going to find the kind of man I enjoy? I always seem to get the other ones.
All right, now you're getting closer to what I'm talking about, because you're really saying, if I am this type of woman that none of these good, eligible males are going to appeal to, then that would be awful. I'd never get what I want, and that would really be something frightful, isn't
Plus,
it?
I don't like thinking of myself that way. I want to put myself on a higher standard. I don't like to think that I may be just an average Jane Doe.
But let's just suppose, for the sake of argument at the moment, that that were so.
All right.
That you were an average Jane Doe. Now, would that be so terrible? It would be inconvenient. It would be unpleasant. You wouldn't want it. But would you get an emotion like shyness, embarrassment, shame out of just believing that maybe I'm going to end up like Jane Doe?
I don't know.
Well, I don't think you could, because you still would have to be saying on some level, as I think you've just said, and it would be very bad. It would be terrible. I would be a no-goodnik if I were just
plus,
Jane Doe.
I'd never get what I want. If I were just a Jane Doe, and if I'd have to accept that, I'd never get what I want, and I don't want to live the rest of my life with just icky men.
Well, it's not necessarily so that you'd never. You really mean your chances would be reduced, because we know some icky girls who get some splendid men, don't we?
That's right.
You see, so you're generalizing there. You're saying it probably would be that I'd have a more difficult time, but then you're jumping to, therefore, I'd never get it all. You see the catastrophizing there that you jumped to.
Yes, but it feels that way to me at the time. It seems like forever.
That's right, but isn't that a vote of non-confidence in you? An essential vote of non-confidence.
Yes.
And the non-confidence is because you're saying, one, I don't want to miss out on things. I would like to get the kind of a man I want and be a, in your words, superior kind of girl who gets a superior kind of man.
Yes.
But if I don't, then I'm practically on the other side of the chain completely, a no-goodnik, somebody who'll never get anything that I want, which is quite an extreme away, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's what I call catastrophizing, taking a true statement, and there is a good deal of truth in what you're saying, if you didn't get the kind of a man you wanted, that it would be inconvenient, annoying, frustrating, which it really would be, and then saying, I'd never possibly get what I want, and even beyond that, you're really saying, and then I couldn't be a happy human being. Aren't you really saying that on some level? But let's just look at that. Let's just assume the worst, as Bertrand Russell once said years ago. Assume the worst, that you never got at all, for whatever the reasons may be, the kind of a man you want. Look at all the other things you could do in life to be happy.
Well, I don't like the whole process. I don't even like as I'm going through it. I don't... All right, even if it wasn't a catastrophe, even if I didn't look at it as a catastrophe, I don't like the way I'm living right now. For example, when I meet somebody that I'm interested in that could have some potential, right away I find I'm not near as relaxed with him. I worry more, should I be friendly? Should I kiss him goodnight? Should I do this? If it's just a Joe Doe and I don't give a darn, I can be anything I want to be. I turn out to be more of a person when I'm not as concerned. I don't like the way I'm,
But you're not merely concerned, you're over-concerned. You're anxious, because if you were just concerned, you'd do your best and you'd be saying to yourself, if I succeed, great. If I don't succeed, tough. Right now, I won't get what I want. But you're over-concerned or anxious. You're really saying, again, that's what we said a moment ago, if I don't get what I want right now, I'll never get it. And that would be so awful that I've got to get it right now. That causes the anxiety, doesn't it?
Yes, or else work toward it.
Yes, but if
I don't get it right now, that's all right, but I want to feel like I'm working toward it.
Yes, but you want a guarantee, I hear. My trained ears hear you saying, I would like a guarantee of working towards it. And there are no certainties and guarantees.
No, Dr. Ellis, I don't know why I'm coming out that way. What I really mean is, I want a step toward working toward it.
Well, what's stopping you?
I don't know, I thought, well, what I was hoping is, whatever this is in me, why I don't seem to be attracting these kind of men, why I seem more on the defensive, why I seem more afraid. you could help me what it is I'm afraid of so I won't do it so much.
Well, my hypothesis is so far that what you're afraid of is not just failing with this individual man, which is really the only thing at issue when you go out with a new, and we're talking about eligible males now, we'll rule out the ineligible ones. You're not just afraid that you'll miss this one. You're afraid that you'll miss this one, and therefore you'll miss every other, and therefore you prove that you are really not up to getting what you want, and wouldn't that be awful? You're bringing in these catastrophes.
Well, you sound more strong at it, but that's similar. I feel like this is silly if I keep this up.
If you keep
There's something I'm doing. There's something I'm doing not to be as real a person with these men that I'm interested in.
That's right. You're defeating your own ends by...
I've done it again.
Right.
If I weren't so doggone anxious about trying to hook this guy, I could be more real. He's going to enjoy me more if I'm real anyway. So I'm only giving him the stinky part of me.
Right.
How can anybody I respect a chooch? And that's what I am when I don't really come through.
But look how you just devalued yourself. Let's just suppose, for the sake of argument, you kept giving the stinky part of you.
Right.
A human being, another person who's trying to get interested in you, might not like these attributes, these characteristics of you, but I don't think he's going to despise you as a person, which you are really doing.
I'm harder on myself than I think
That's
he is.
exactly
But he
the
just
point.
doesn't like me. There's not enough to me.
Right, and I say before, if people just didn't like you and you went through enough of them, and it would be hard to go through enough, but it would be possible, you'd eventually find one who did like you and whom you liked. But as long as you devalue yourself personally in your own eyes, you complicate the problem enormously, and you're not focusing on how can I be myself, change the traits. If you, for example, had let us just say, a mangled arm, and you wouldn't accept your whole person, your being, because of this mangled arm, then you would focus so much on that mangled arm that you wouldn't be able to do things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
That's almost what I do, yes.
Yes, you see, that's exactly so. You're taking a part of you, an arm, and focusing almost completely on that. Just to bring it down to our own conversation, you're taking a part of you, your shyness, your not being yourself with males, and focusing so much on that part that you're almost making it the whole of you. And you get an awful picture of your total self because of this defective part, and we're assuming, you and I, that it is defective. We're not glossing over and saying, no, you're doing all right. You're not doing that well.
Right.
Now, if you could accept yourself for the time being with this defective part, with these attributes, and not beat yourself over the head, as I feel you definitely are doing, then it becomes a relatively simple problem to work and practice against this negative attribute. In other words, let's get back to that now, how to be yourself. Let's just suppose for the moment that you really were fully accepting yourself with your failings.
All right.
You know you're going to go out, and you know you're going to screw up with the next man, the man after that in all probability, but you're saying, all right, I have to go through a learning process. That's too bad. I won't be very good during this while, but I'll do it just as I would at ice skating, where I'd have to fall on my neck for a few times before I learned to ice skate. Okay, now let's suppose that. Then, if that was so, if you were really accepting you, you'd go out, take the risks of being you. Because after all, if you do win one of these men, you have to be yourself. You're not winning them for a day. You're not winning them for an affair. I assume you want to marry one of these individuals eventually and be with them on a long time.
But mostly a long relationship. I don't think so much of marriage, just a long relationship.
All right, a long relationship in the course of which you couldn't act. So we don't want to give you some technique of acting well that he'll later find out was a role-playing sort of thing. Yeah. So you have to eventually be yourself. Now, if you really weren't so disturbed about these current failings of yours, you could go out and be this self of yours. Ask yourself, what do I really want to do with this man to help enjoy him and have him help enjoy me? Because that's the basic function of life, enjoyment, which we tend to lose. And you'd force yourself to take the risk of being that. Because if you succeeded, great. If you failed, too bad. Either you're not for him, or he may even not be for you. Because don't forget, you said before, when these men reject you, you assume right away it must be my doing and my fault. You know, they may not be your cup of tea, and you may not be their cup of tea, and it's nobody's fault. It's just true incompatibility.
Well, it could be, yes.
You see.
Yeah.
So if you would really accept yourself as you are, and then force yourself, and if you were one of my regular patients, I would give you this homework assignment and then check up on you to see whether you could force yourself to open your big mouth and be you for a while, even though it hurt with these males, you would find that A, you would start being yourself and gradually lopping off these inefficiencies, which incidentally are the result of not being you, but watching yourself from the outside while you're trying to be you, which is almost impossible, because you can't spy on yourself and still be yourself very well at the same time.
No, but it would become like a habit.
After a while, if you took the risks and forced yourself to, as I said, open your big mouth, and even though you thought maybe it'll come out badly, maybe he won't like me, maybe I'll lose him completely, and so on and so forth, then you'd start swinging in the groove and being what you want to be, and I would almost guarantee that you'd become more practiced and less inefficient, especially in terms of the shyness, because you wouldn't be focusing on, oh my God, isn't this awful, how bad I am. You would be focusing on what a nice individual this is, and how can I enjoy him, which is the focus.
Well, usually my focus is the opposite way.
Right.
How can I be more attractive to him, and how can he be pleased by me?
Because underneath, if I am not, then I cannot enjoy myself. I refuse to accept myself unless I attract and win this good individual. Isn't that what you're basically saying?
Yes, and I even go further, Dr. Ellis. When there is one of these men I come in contact with, and I find that I want to cultivate more of a relationship. Well, if he accepts me and we're going along pretty great, I find myself constantly on the defensive, constantly watching the way I sit, not drinking too much, the whole time, instead of just relaxing and saying he'll either like me or he doesn't.
In emotion psychotherapy, you're giving a very good illustration of why other directedness doesn't pay. Because if you really are defining yourself in terms of others' estimation of you, then even when you're ahead of the game and you're winning them, you have to be saying to yourself, will I win him today? Will I win him tomorrow? Will I keep winning him? And you're always focused on, am I doing the thing to please him? And you never are yourself. You never have a self. While if you're saying, what do I want to do in life? There must be some human beings who would like me the way I am. Let's see if this is one of those human beings. Then that's the only way, isn't it, that you can be. You see?
Yeah.
Now, we haven't got too much time now, so let's try to get it off on a constructive note of more concretely what you can do. You asked before where you can go, how you can meet new people. I'd say that I don't know this particular area, but it's almost any place. If you could do what we are talking about, really take risks and focus on what you want out of life, and on the fact that it's going to take time, which unfortunately it does, and it is not awful, and you're not awful while it's taking that time, then you can leave yourself open unshyly to all kinds of new encounters. And these encounters can take place on buses, while waiting for a streetcar, if they have streetcars in this area, at cocktail parties, anywhere. You can talk to people who look eligible. You can ask your friends to get you eligible males, and so on. But the main thing is that you have to, A, like yourself while you're not doing badly, and B, not be intolerant against conditions which are bad. And I'm agreeing with you that they are. Now, as I said, I would give you, if you were a patient of mine, the homework assignment of deliberately, very deliberately going out and getting yourself into trouble. In other words, taking the most eligible males you can find at the moment and forcing yourself, risking yourself to be you.
Are you saying even if it were like if I went into a doctor's office to start a conversation with him because he was attractive to me or he appealed to me?
Right.
I'd even go so far as to starting out a conversation with him, a personal one?
Why not? If he's an eligible individual, any kind of an eligible individual.
Well, I feel you accept that, but that seems awfully brazen or something.
Well, let's suppose it is brazen. What have you got to lose? The worst he can do is reject you, and you don't have to reject you if you were thinking along the lines that we've been 25 minutes or so.
Oh, yeah.
Now, can you try to do that?
I think so. It sort of gives me a spurt to go out and see. You're right. That's all I can do is be rejected.
Right. And that leaves you intact. It just leaves you, unfortunately, not for the moment, getting what you want. So you try the one you've already read, and I'll be very interested in finding out what happens.
Oh, I'm excited about it.
Well, it was certainly very nice meeting you, Clara.
Thank you, Doctor.
I enjoyed talking with this interesting and I think highly courageous patient, and thought that the session gave a pretty good illustration of a fairly typical session of rational emotive psychotherapy. How was it typical? In several ways. In the first place, I was able rather rapidly and quickly to get to some of what I think are the philosophic cores of the patient's disturbances, to show her that the reason she is feeling shy and ashamed and afraid in this instance is because, even though partially unwittingly, she is defining herself in a very negative way, or devaluing herself by blaming herself too much for imperfect behavior. Because perfectionism is the root of most human evils, and she was showing some fairly typical perfectionistic notions. So very quickly, as is usually done in rational emotive psychotherapy, we skip some of the asides, we skip going back into the history, as some of the psychoanalysts do, and we skip some of the transference relations between us and the patient, and we skip some of the nonverbal expression. Not that we think these things are quite unimportant, but we think they're of relatively little relevance to the basic core of the patient's disturbance, which is her philosophy of life. And typically, again, this patient showed both anxiety and low frustration tolerance, which most patients showed, and these were intertwined, and again, very usually, she was then beating herself over the head, blaming herself, condemning herself for feeling these kinds of feelings. Now, she did not see very clearly, at least I thought so at the beginning of the session, exactly what declarative sentences and exclamatory sentences she was telling herself to create these feelings, and I endeavored to show her some of these sentences and what could be done about it. And among other things, I also, though briefly, because this is just one brief session, tried to give her a homework assignment that she could go and get her teeth into and actively try to do, to depropagandize herself by going out and taking risks, which normally up to now she hasn't been taking that much of. It's interesting to note that, again, quite typically in this session, although I was attacking fairly vigorously the patient's attitudes or philosophies, she did not feel an attack on her. She felt that I was supporting her, if anything, and she ended up, I thought, rather optimistically feeling that I had given her several ideas of what she could do in the future. Again, rather typically in this session, I kept persuading the patient and attacking her ideas and showing her that her philosophy of life not only was such and such, but that if she stuck to this kind of philosophy, she had to get negative and self-defeating results from it. And then I kept persistently going on, even though at times she became defensive and wasn't quite accepting by any means what I was saying. I didn't let this bother me, but kept going on against her basic core system, her value system, because this is, again, what bothers patients, that they give up very easily on attacking their own negative evaluations of themselves, and therefore they persist forever. Now, there were limitations, of course, especially in terms of time to the session, and these limitations did have some effect. For example, there was not enough time for repetition. In several sessions, I would have gone over much of this same material until I was sure that it had sunk in. Then I would have had time to get feedback from the patient to see whether she really understood in action in particular what I was talking about, and whether she was following it up or leading herself up some other diverting pathway which people can do. There was no time to emphasize that she would have to continually reassess her evaluations of herself and her general philosophies and do rethinking for the rest of her life. There was no time to show the patient very much that even during this session, in relation to me and what she was saying about herself, that she was displaying her bad attitudes toward herself. And finally, there was no occasion, of course, since this was an individual session, to see how she related specifically to other non-therapists, as she would in group therapy, and in the midst of this group situation to show her exactly what was going on and what she could do about it. But I do feel hopeful about the session, and think that perhaps I was able at least to give the patient a few ideas which she could then go out and work on her own, because unless patients do work themselves with the material that we therapists give them in psychotherapy, nothing eventually happens. It isn't any magic that we have for them, but we can give them certain catalytic ideas and influences which then, if they work and practice at, will do them good for the rest of their lives.